My name is Joni Parsons. I'm co-creator of Revel 11, and we started Revel 11 6 years ago this year uh, to get women together and support one another in a variety of different ways. We have meaningful, edgy, fun, and timely events for women on a regular basis, both virtually and in person in Seattle when we're there. And then also we hold retreats around the globe. We have several coming up, which are very exciting. Um, so just to switch gears, we're going to be talking this morning about honest sex. And Shana is joining us, as I said, from Portland, Oregon. And we have been, everyone wants to know how to have a better relationship, how to communicate better, and what those elements are that are going to make us tune in together with our partner. So as I read Shana's book, which I loved, by the way, Shana, I realized that there's three things that are important. And some of these might be new, but we're going to be talking about how to really dive into these. Connection comes from our own self-awareness, vulnerability, and honest communication. So Shana has been a relationship coach for over 20 years. So she's got lots of experience to share with us today. She hosts the podcast Man Alive, and I encourage you to watch her TED Talk, which talks about the crisis between men and women. So with that, let's get that crisis closed and start opening this book and learning more about relationships. So Shana, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
How are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable. I've actually been recording the audiobook, and I've been rereading the book and realizing that my parents they read it. At least my mom read it. And some part of me is like, did I really say all of this? Really put all of this out there in the world? So
let's dive in, because we want to know what mom and dad might be like. What is she saying here? Yeah. So first of all, you've spoken to thousands of women, or 1,000 men and women, about relationships, sex, intimacy, and everything else that couples do. So what led to this book? This is your second book. And so what led to Honest Sex?
Yeah. And my first book was more a compilation of podcasts. So this is this is the first book that I actually wrote. I think what led to it is the recognition that a lot of couples come to me thinking, all right, we want to spice things up, or we want to get more intimate. So, do we do date nights? Do we do lingerie? Like, what do we do? And my take is that when you have, sorry, I just highlighted me, so I got distracted by myself.
Well, hi, you.
I know, like, maybe how do I not look at myself? So my take is that when we have mature honesty, which I talk about in the book, and when we're consistently revealing ourselves to our partners in a mature and loving way, so that we're getting to know each other on deeper and deeper levels, and we're building trust, and we're building, the foundation of love, that passion arises from there, not always and not immediately necessarily, but it's like this ever evolving newness, which a lot of couples find fades, as relationship goes on. There's safety and there's stability, but that newness and spontaneity can fade. And so bringing this kind of honesty brings the passion back.
So honest sex is not necessarily what people would think. So let's go to the root of what honest sex means.
Yeah. So, all right, and first of all, I divided the book. So the first section is all on honesty and what is mature honesty. And then the second section is what is sex actually. And then the third section is more communication tools and practices. And so one of the things I believe is that most of us grew up with a very limited definition of sex. And in the book, I talk about how, when I looked in the dictionary, it's like rhythmic genitalia movements. It's very heterosexual, not homosexual, very heterosexual, like, very based in, you have to be cisgendered, heterosexual. It's about the genitals. And over the years, I've studied a lot and practiced a lot of tantra and orgasmic meditation, and just different practices that have shown me that sex is so much bigger than just our genitals and even than just our bodies, that we have an energetic body, that we have the capacity to feel each other emotionally. And so I also talk about one-dimensional sex, which is, okay, I'm having a physical experience over here, versus four-dimensional sex, which is I'm having a physical experience. It could be if I'm with a partner, right? My partner's having a physical experience. I can feel their physical experience. We're both having emotional experiences and energetic experiences, and we're feeling all of that, and it exponentially increases in pleasure. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people don't have the sex life they want because of this limited definition. And so we don't even know, like, there's more possible.
So let's step back just a little bit, because I think this really stood out to me about self-awareness. Yeah. And let's talk about like deeply into that piece, because you have to be self-aware in order to be in an honest, loving, wonderful relationship. So let's go back
there. Yeah. Which is great because, as I could have named the book Honest Intimacy or Honest Love or Honest Relationships, right? And somehow that title just wouldn't go away. And that's the one that came out. But the first part is, how do I be honest with myself? How do I know myself? Because if we don't know ourselves and we can't communicate our likes and our dislikes and our fears and our concerns and our desires, then we have a pretty one-dimensional relationship, both with ourselves and with the partner. So if we're living out somebody else's expectation and somebody else's shoulds and, not really getting to know ourselves, then most of us at some point hit a midlife crisis period or some kind of crisis where we realize, like, whose life am I living anyway?
Absolutely. So let's talk about the vulnerability in that and really showing up as who you are, like really as your true self. There's a lot of vulnerability in ripping away the layers of the onion, as we always say, of where our heart is coming from, past wounds that we come up against with the partner that might trigger you. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes, there's incredible vulnerability, right? And one of the ways I talk about mature honesty is, instead of blaming or attacking or saying you're a jerk or you're mean or you always do this, it's actually coming back and saying, like, oof, I feel hurt, or wow, I hear that you're judging me, and this is really bringing up my past wounds from how my dad used to judge me. And, I'm going to be here with you and talk about this and sit in the pain of it, as opposed to just checking out or, avoiding it or exploding and then not really getting to the heart of it either. So, like I said, as we started, even I still feel really vulnerable. I'm in a relationship that I've been in only for 4 months. And amazingly, this man found out that I read the book, and now is practicing like all of the honesty and vulnerability. And it's so beautiful. And I still, have tears sometimes when we have conversations, or when I admit that there's something I'm struggling with, or something that has me think, I don't know if we're going to end up in a long-term relationship, so it takes courage. But one of the things I wrote in the book too is, it takes a kind of courage to risk that vulnerability, because oftentimes we think, I'm going to break something, this is going to fall apart. But if we don't, we already know what happens, right? If your relationship feels stale, or if things are not where you want them to be, you already know what happens when you avoid that. So
I've been in a relationship for 10 years almost. And, one of the things that Jordan said to me really early on, he's like, don't let things fester. Like, bring them up as soon as possible. And that has been the magic, I feel like, in our relationship, is that we are always very honest with one another. And, sometimes when it does go back, to the past or past relationships, sometimes I will take 24 hours and just go think about something or go take a walk.
Yep.
And then really do some self-reflection on why that triggered me or why I'm feeling the way I am. Do
Yep.
you have any tools that people could use to come up again when they come up against that point where you're like, this just doesn't feel right, or
Yeah. Yeah.
something gets triggered?
Well, you're speaking very beautifully to them, right? So sometimes we think, oh, I have to finish this conversation right now. We've got to get this, and sometimes it's really best to take a break, whether it's 10 minutes or 24 hours or however long, and to communicate between partners. Okay, this is how much time we're going to take, and then we're going to come back together and see what's going on. Journaling, I think you said, right? Like sometimes you do some writing about what's really, I have some exercises in the book too around, what's the thing that's bothering me, and what's the underlying layer of this, right? Like even I gave an example of, if my partner, I like to have the dishes done and clean at night, so in the morning I can just start the day and get my kid to school, and it doesn't creep up on me, and I don't feel overwhelmed. And okay, so if I was having a conversation with my partner, the surface layer might be, I'm frustrated if you have a different cleanup style, or you're fine with things festering or whatever. But underlying that, right, there's a big vulnerability of, it's hard for me to ask for help. It's hard for me to ask for what I want and need. I think I should be like, I should be the woman. The woman in the relationship does all the things. She doesn't need help. She's supposed to handle the kids and the laundry and the everything. And so really, when we get to that underlying layer, and journaling can help that, meditation can help that. For some people, it's exercise and walking, walking, running, whatever, like moving your body, to really start to look at, okay, what are the underlying layers? And the next one is, what's vulnerable about this for me, right? Why is this actually vulnerable to me? And then the willingness to share that with a partner can really shift the dynamic.
And one thing I like about that example specifically are two things. One is an invitation to sit with the discomfort, right? And then what is the underlying piece of that? And then two is, and most importantly, is we're talking about dishes. It's not the big things in life that we get triggered about. It's things like the dishes, or I want to take a walk and you don't. Or whatever it is.
And it's so like, right, those can feel so like, I can feel abandoned because you don't want to do the thing I want to do. And that's okay. I don't think we should make ourselves wrong for having such big reactions to smaller things. But when we let ourselves really sit with, oh, I'm feeling abandoned because in my family, nobody ever wanted to do what I wanted to do. So it goes back a lot farther. And most of the time there's history there. And so one of the things I wrote in the book is, it's actually never about the laundry or the garbage or the dishes. It's about not feeling supported or understood or connected. Right. And so it would be different if your partner said, I love you. I don't want to go on a walk right now, but I love you dearly. And I can't wait for you to come home. And when you come home, we're going to do X, Y, and Z together. Right. That's like a really connected communication versus, no, I don't want to go on a walk and there's nothing else there.
And then your invitation is not to react and, come up against that trigger and go, take some time, sit with it, and then understand what is really going on. Honestly, that's what I found so profound about your book, Shana, is that, and that's why I asked you that question, is honest sex doesn't necessarily, it's not what you expect it to be, because it really comes down to the whole person and the depth of our experiences and how to bring the magic out from those experiences instead of the wall.
Yeah. I have a chapter called The Myth of Happy Sex. And in that one, I talked about an experience of mine where I was in bed with a partner and, he looked at me and he was like, "You're not really into this, are you?" And which was, it was pretty different for us. We had a great sex life. And so in that moment, I was like, okay, do I want to actually be honest, or do I want to, lie and just, oh, okay, well, a little white lie, like we only have one time a week together and maybe I should just keep going and, we should just have sex because we're not going to have it for another week. And then I realized that what was going on was that I had just been to a funeral that day and I was grieving, and my heart was just, my heart was, I was gonna, hurt. I was gonna say a mess, but I don't want to say a mess, right? My heart was hurt, and I could deny it until we started being intimate, and then my heart started opening, and then I couldn't not feel what was there. And how beautiful the experience was, that I think a lot of couples are like, wait a minute, we can't go there. We can't have this emotional conversation in the bedroom. Then, there's scarcity. We're not going to have sex. And he just really beautifully held my heart, and I cried. And then, we ended up making love, and it was so deep and connected and beautiful because I felt like all of me could be there
and be seen. Right?
Yeah, that I could be honest in that way. And I think about how you said not react, right? Like, I came from a household where my mom is very reactive, still to this day, just like it's intense. And so I then at first shut down and never reacted. I never even got angry. I just got sad. And then when I was married years ago, I went through a phase of like kind of allowing myself to be more reactive, which completely destroyed the foundation of our relationship. And so the Viktor Frankl quote is my favorite, where he talks about that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space, we have choice, right? We have choice in how we respond. And so I made a commitment after my divorce that I was only going to speak when I could say something that I felt proud of, that like I respected myself, right, for saying. And so I think we give ourselves a lot more permission to just let it out, just let anything out, let the garbage out, than we should. I don't usually like
I think so. One of the quotes that you put in the book quotes Dr. John and Julie Gottman. I mean, the foremost experts on love and sex and everything relationship.
Yep.
They found that it was not conflict that killed a couple's chance of staying together, but rather how they treated one another in the midst of conflict. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so they talk about the 4 horsemen. I'm probably not going to remember exactly, but there's like stonewalling, distancing, there's something around exploding. It's like how you treat each other in the midst of a conflict really shows how you are holding each other and loving each other. And so as you start to shift, and one of the practices that I give in the book is shifting from blame and attack to more vulnerability, but also just using your body, right? And so one example I give is it goes a lot better when you say, oh, when you said that, my stomach clenched, goes a lot better than you're an asshole for saying that, right? It creates much more of a
you do want to say that, right? I mean, let's be honest.
Of course, you want to say it.
You want to say that. It's
yes.
like you're being a jerk right now.
Yes, fuck you, whatever, right? You're being an asshole. Right. Like, okay, so then we have a choice. There's a choice point. Okay, if I say that, he, she, they, like, probably going to get defensive. But if I can actually slow down and say, ooh, okay, I'm having a hard time, or this is really hurting me, or whatever it may be, then there's a chance for, instead of like, wall to wall, right, that we actually can start to maybe dance a little bit more and be connected.
So let's talk about your book. And one thing that, as you mentioned, is you have practice in each of these areas. I don't know if you can see this. Sorry. Well, it just says practice. And then she goes through. Yeah. So tell us about how you did tell us how you broke up the book, but tell us about these practice sessions, because this is so nice to have something to roll off of. And to talk. I think one thing that's important is to read this book and to talk about it with your partner and do it together, like you said you're doing with your friend. But tell us about the practice sessions.
Yeah. And, the practices too, even if you're single and you want the foundation for an honest relationship and honest sex, that there are options for how to do it on your own or with friends or family too. So in each chapter at the end, there are different practices. And so if the chapter focuses on being honest with yourself, then I gave some sentence stems or some, cues for, all right, so one of my practices has been, what haven't I been honest with myself about today? And sometimes it's with other people, and sometimes it's just myself, right? One of my examples was, oh, I worked myself to the bone today, and why do I keep doing that to myself? Do I really need to do that to myself? So just starting to be more honest with yourself. And then, in the chapters around desires, okay, let's start to get clear. Well, if nobody was going to say no to me, or if I was asking for 100% of what I want instead of 30% of what I want, what would I ask for?
Right.
And some
And
of
let's
this,
go
right, you
through.
can do, I was just going to say, you don't have to show your partner, right? Like I give yourself permission to just have it for yourself first, and then you can share it.
Yeah, maybe you do it individually and then share as a couple, which would be, I would love that. So say in chapter 6, what is sex actually? So we go to the practice areas, and it says the beliefs that keep me from wanting or enjoying sex as much as I want to are.
Yeah.
So some examples might be good girls don't like sex,
Mhm.
having thoughts about sex that is perverted and dirty. I am only supposed to feel pleasure if someone else is feeling it too. So write your own.
Right. And so
and
that
then-
chapter, I wanted to make sure to give, okay, what's in the way? And then what would I want more of? Because if we're trying to get to what we want more of without recognizing that there's something that's getting in the way, then we often can't find our desires, or they get stuck.
So here's another example. My vision of an expanded sex life might include, I feel intimately connected with my partner before and during sex. I speak up when pleasure fades or I feel uncomfortable. I allow the part of me that wants to play with domination and surrender to ask for this. So these are all really good examples, and then you're invited to write your own. So let's talk about those.
Yeah. I just had a thought and I think it left me. It was, all right, we'll come back to it if it comes back. But yeah, something around like, well, first of all, the definition of sex, the more honest definition I think of sex is that it's pleasure oriented instead of goal oriented. And we're connecting with as much of ourselves as possible, right? So with our energy body and our emotional selves and our physicality and, sometimes even our minds, but mostly we're getting beyond our mind. And so, yeah, having that expanded definition or that expanded sense of what's possible, I think what that also makes possible for couples, and I think a lot of us as we get older and we don't have the time to have as much spontaneity and there's kids around, we can plan having dates together. And even if we're not in the mood for physical sex, right, we can start to have experiences where we're breathing together or massaging each other or looking into each other's eyes. And as we start to expand our capacity to feel our bodies and feel the senses of everything around us, it becomes much more multi-layered, and we can connect and really have a lot of intimacy in ways that don't feel like I'm not ready for. And then sometimes as those energetic or sensual experiences happen, maybe then we are more ready for intercourse or some other kind of sex that's, more intense. But sometimes it's just enough as it is too.
It's so rare that we actually take the time to look into one another's eyes, or to touch softly, or just to be present one-on-one intimately and slow down enough. We're living in such a fast society, and it's so fast-paced. And here's your partner. For us, we've been together for a long time, and I know there's some people that have joined us this morning who have been together for 30 plus years. And how do you begin to reconnect, Shana? Is it taking those moments and giving yourself that space to really be with one another?
I often suggest having a conversation about the relationship, which again, vulnerable, right? It's not just like super easy, like, hey, sweetheart, let's sit down and talk about this, because we don't know sometimes, or if we haven't had it, it's because we think that someone may not be available for it. I think what can happen if you start, going around and being like, I'm just going to look in your eyes, or I'm going to do something different, partners can be like, what are you doing? Or where's this coming from? Or even be a little more dismissive about it, which can be painful. So I often recommend backing up a little bit and having a conversation of, hey, it's been 30 years, I want this to keep getting better and better. I want us to keep loving better and receiving love better and having more passion and play and fun. And like, let's talk about what that would look like for you and what that would look like for me. And I think often there's a lot more than sex, right? That's why in some ways the book starts with the honesty about anything and everything, and then moves more into sex, because you can't separate the two. So if you're not enjoying each other outside the bedroom, it's possible you'll enjoy each other inside the bedroom, but it's much less likely.
So I mean, when you were saying that, I think that there would be a lot of hesitation for people to bring up that conversation. So how would you recommend doing that?
Yeah, I would recommend by setting the
fear,
context. Yeah, and saying something like, I was reading this book, or I listened to this talk, and I realized that we haven't really talked a lot about our relationship in all these years. And would you be willing? Would you be willing? And I think the framing of, and I talk about this there was a section on debriefing an experience or debriefing sex, where instead of complaints, the opposite side of every complaint is a desire, right? So if there's something we don't like or don't want, then there's something we want different or we want instead. And so really framing it like, I want to look at what we do want. And, I think there are ways that we've gotten stuck with each other, or we complain at each other. And I want us to feel more loved, like I want it for you and I want it for me. So just setting that context, and even saying, this feels vulnerable, or this feels scary because I don't know how you're going to react to this. But I love the question, would you be willing? Would you be willing? Yeah. And if not, if they're not willing, then there's a conversation around, okay, like, how do we create a win-win? If I want to have this conversation and you don't want to have this conversation, how can we actually collaborate together? How can we co-create together, instead of, if somebody is a big no, then we just drop it? Because I've met a lot of couples where one person is a no and the other person just lets it go. And if you just let it go, you're ultimately not going to be satisfied or feel connected.
Again, I just want to say, we started out with not a rule, but an invitation to always share and not to hold back, because I think that's when that block happens. Yeah. And so there's always a willingness. It's like, hey.
Yeah. How do you say it when there's something uncomfortable?
Can we talk? I mean, I just say it out. I mean, I just say it straight.
So, and you had the invitation, like, that's what's so beautiful too, right?
I already have
the invitation, it gets easier.
Yeah, it really does.
So you could also be an invitation for that. Like, you could say, hey, if there are things that aren't working for you, or things that you've kind of settled for over the last few decades, this feels really scary, but I think I want to know them, because I don't want us to fade apart. I don't want one of us to run off with someone else because something seems more exciting, when actually we could have it here. We just haven't cultivated that.
And cultivating on a daily basis. I mean, it takes a daily, almost a ritual to stay connected. And I love that piece of being in relationship. Yeah. And I know that it's not easy to do that, but if you commit to it and you are with a partner that sees you, it is much easier to be there and to go there. Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about how conversations and sex create more connection and pleasure. And you have 4 tips, which we've all been talking about. So the first one is prioritize curiosity over fear and defensiveness. Yeah. So tell us more.
Yeah. So, and again, this goes beyond sex too, right? If somebody wants to go on a vacation and the other person's like, I don't want to, money's tight, I can't take off of work, all these things. The invitation there is, to get curious first about your partner's desire. Okay, you're wanting a vacation. So, can we talk more about what you're imagining, and like bringing up the curiosity and questions before the concerns. And when bringing the concerns, bringing them in a way where it's, hey, okay, I'm hearing that this is what you want, and I have this concern. Can we talk about this too? Versus, if we're just a strong no to someone's request or someone's desire, it feels really shitty. And then they're not going to be a yes to our desires, right? We become this defensive dance, and we're kind of like, you didn't give me what I wanted, I'm not going to give you, what you wanted. So really prioritizing curiosity over just being a no or getting defensive is it creates this upward spiral, right? When you imagine, oh, then later in the day or later in the week, when we're thinking about being intimate or having sex, if I felt heard and understood, it's going to go very differently than if I felt rejected and denied, before.
Absolutely. Okay. 2 is get to the root of desire.
Yeah. So that one is that every desire we have, there are motivations for. And so if we understand the motivations, then we can co-create something together that actually meets those motivations. And I gave an example in the book, which is a little bit edgy, which is, one person wanting to be tied up sexually. Yeah. And the example was, someone might love the kind of the play or the roughness of it, and someone else might just want it to be super intimate and connected and, right, and taken care of. And someone else might love the fact that they can't do anything wrong, because this is one of mine. It's like, if someone's binding me or holding me or whatever, it's like, I know I can't do anything wrong because there's nothing I can do. And so that eases the part in my mind that always feels like I'm doing something wrong. I'm too much. I'm not enough. So if you don't know the motivations, then you can create experiences that really go off the rails. And if you do know the motivations, if couples are, if one person's like, well, I want to do this thing, and the other one's like, I don't know about that. Okay, what's the underlying desire or motivation? Because then we can create, many, many different experiences that could meet that. It doesn't have to be that one thing. And then we also know that we get to create things that are actually meeting a desire versus having someone feel less like their desires are being met.
That's terrific. Okay. 3, be clear you are exploring or a decision-making mode, whether you're in one or the other.
Yeah, I've had both in business conversations and in relationship conversations, a lot of pain when I was just brainstorming and exploring, and the other person was in decision-making mode. And then they got in this heated arguments of like, I don't want to do this. And the other person's like, I'm just framing my idea, I'm just throwing out ideas, and now you're totally rejecting them. And now I feel pissed. And right. So if we know, oh, you're just exploring, and we can brainstorm, and often in the brainstorming phase, nothing is thrown out. I got certified in positive intelligence coaching over the pandemic, and there's the yes and game that I've played in other places too. But, the yes and game is like, okay, we appreciate something about what someone just said, and we have a different idea, and they may be crazy, and they may be things we would never do. But the brainstorming gives us a little more space to play and be creative, and something might come out of it. But, if we're always cutting down each other's ideas or being like, that's not going to work, or I don't want to do that, or I don't know how I'm going to do that, then we don't actually hear each other, and we don't stay connected.
So that goes really nicely into the next one, which is collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Be willing to collaborate. And if there are places where you're not willing to collaborate, right, we get to be honest about that too, and start to look at why, why aren't you willing to collaborate? Sometimes we have really strong parts of us that are just like, I want it the way I want it. And, this is how it is, and this is how it goes. I think when we're in relationship, we have to be willing to look at those parts to see, is that creating the impact I want in my relationship? And if not, then how could I collaborate about some of these things?
That's terrific. So I really wanted this session for people to be able to take away a lot, because we all need so much help when it comes to honest sex and relationships. And I love the fact that you brought up business, because so many of the elements of this book can also relate to what we do in business every day.
Totally.
So right now we're going to talk about the 6 fundamentals of deeper intimacy. And that could be in, a relationship with your sister, your mother, your brother, or whatever. And then also how to have better sex. With your partner, hopefully it's just with your partner. But let's talk about these fundamentals. So be on the same team.
Yeah. Again, okay, how can we create win-wins here? How can we see that we're on the same team instead of, if you get your need met, then I have to lose, right? Then we're on different teams, and then we're trying to play this game and nobody usually wins. And so to consider that you actually are on the same team, and that a win for you could be a win for me, and we can create these win-wins, goes a lot better in relationship.
Okay, we're going to just go through these. Differences can bring you closer.
Yeah, I think recognizing, we often choose each other for those differences, and then later they get annoying. So starting to look at.
Isn't it true that the thing that you love about somebody the most in the beginning is the thing that drives you, is the most irritating.
Yeah. And so again, just to look at, okay, what are the net positives here? What's good about the fact that these things are different, and how can we use them being on the same team? How can we use them to our advantage?
Okay. Assume the best about one another. Hopefully that's true in most relationships, but I don't think it is, honestly.
I don't think it is too. I mean, this radically changed my life when I started assuming the best about people, and then getting curious instead of assuming the worst. Assuming, like you said, that because you wanted to hurt me, or like, can we really assume, oh, this person loves me? And if they're not living up to some idea that I had or something that we agreed to, can I get curious about what happened instead of just cutting them down and then thinking you're not who I thought you were? And, that just shuts everything down really fast.
Mm-hmm. And then share why.
Yeah. Again, going back to the motivations and the why, Alison Armstrong is a really amazing resource. She teaches women a lot about men, and I think she's doing both these days, but she talks about how different it is when a man would come to a woman in a heterosexual relationship and talk about why they want to have more sex, if that's their desire, rather than just the wanting to have sex, right? Like the physical thing, where I think a lot of women can then feel put upon, or oh, you're just objectifying me. But when we really get into the deeper whys, it's vulnerable and it's intimate.
So going back to use desires and not complaints.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, we can frame anything. Ugh, you're touching me too hard. I don't like it. Okay. So the desire there would be, will you touch me more lightly or softly? Right. And how do we do this in a way that feels good to both of us?
I have a really funny example here. So in the movie Runaway Bride, there's a scene that I always talk about how Julia Roberts is in the kitchen, and whoever, I can't remember who this other star was, but he goes, you don't even know how you like your eggs cooked. And so she's in the kitchen and she's got a scramble, an omelet, and an over easy omelet. And I think it's really important to know what you like and don't like.
Very important.
And that's right. It's so important. It's like, what feels good? What doesn't feel good? Yeah. Know yourself so well. And it is going back to what this whole book is about, is knowing your true self. What is your true self, and how do you express that and know it and ask for it?
Yeah. Right. The foundation, right? You have to know it before you can ask for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Undefend yourself.
Yeah, this one is beautiful too. There's a book called Undefended Love that has been a strong support in my life. It's actually on my desk since I was in my 20s, when I was in grad school, studying psychology. And they really talk about how I don't know, I was gonna say funny. It's kind of funny and sad that we will defend our identities. Like, I had an experience I wrote about in the book where, when I said no to helping our friends move, and my ex-husband said, you're not very caring, and I was like, Are you kidding me? Like my identity is that I'm a caring person who, and I take care of people. That's like my value, and you're telling me I'm not. And so that had me explode, or I exploded, right? As opposed to not defending and really being like, oh, okay. Whew, let me take a breath. Okay, you don't think I'm being caring right now. All right. We could have actually talked about it, and I gave examples of how we could have handled that in the moment, that we did not handle that and did not go very well. But that how interesting it is that we're trying to defend these parts of ourselves that we don't necessarily really, some of them we don't even want anymore, right? Or we don't want to have to stand up for them.
Yeah, there's some things that just keep rearing its ugly head, right? And they just keep coming back to haunt you. And it's just the self-awareness. It's like, oh, here it is again. How am I going to react this time?
Yes.
So then you end the book with conscious relating tools. And one that I really appreciate is daily appreciation. So talk about how you do that in your relationships.
Yeah. I mean, it's become such a natural thing for me to just be uber appreciative, right? And really to not take things for granted, and to not think. I remember one time I was home with my ex-husband when we were married, and my sister made fun of me for appreciating him for doing something. Like he helped me, I don't know, empty the dishwasher or something. And I was like, thank you so much. That's amazing. And she was like, that's just what we do. Like, why are you appreciating him? And I'm like, no, we feel good when we get appreciated, and then we do more of the things we're appreciated for. And so really the practice of looking for what we appreciate, even if we're frustrated, even if we've had a bad day or year, right? Or decade, but the practice of really looking for, what can I appreciate about this person? Oh, I appreciate that you stayed even in this awful discussion, right? You didn't walk away from this. Or I appreciate that you're here with me every day, even though we've had a really hard time. So getting that practice of looking for what we appreciate, even in the midst of things that we're upset about.
So that's so lovely. And one thing I want to say there is that what you put out in a relationship is what you get back.
Yes.
And, when you show appreciation, it is going to come back to you. If you're triggered about something and you're pushing towards somebody, that's going to come back to you.
Yep.
And somebody said to me so many years ago, and it always stood out, it's like, I just try to stay positive in my relationship as much as I can, because that positivity is what I want back in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that was so beautiful. And sometimes it's hard to remember, but it really is, really is what fuels a beautiful relationship.
So true. And I think we have to be kind and have compassion for ourselves, and we all have bad days, and we're never going to be perfect. And right. Okay. If I think we are all responsible for ourselves and our own happiness, and keeping ourselves feeling alive and well, and not, needing or depending on someone else for that. Because then we get to co-create something really beautiful together, as opposed to trying to fill something that feels missing with someone else.
Right. So if you have questions, we would love for you to put those in the chat. I think everybody's been listening so intently to Shana that we need some questions. So we have about 15 minutes left, and we would love to hear from you. One of the things in here, you talk about CPR.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Okay. So a CPR is a tool: context, purpose, results. And so it's a really, you can read a little bit more about it in the book, but the whole point of it is that you can be more conscious and more intentional about your relationship. And it could be, sometimes I've done this for, 2023, I have a CPR. So I have a context for the year, I have a purpose for the year, and then I have these results that I want to have happen. And you could do that with a partner. And sometimes I've done it where and we did it on a honeymoon, I went on my honeymoon, and it was like, it really, to start an experience or to start a year intentionally, then guides our attention and has us focus where we want to focus, instead of haphazardly hoping, right, that we're going to end up where we want to be. We could do it about your sex life too. Okay. The context of our sex life is I don't know, sacred intimacy, or that, that one speaks to me. I don't know if it would speak to someone else. Someone else, it might be totally
Love that.
different. But
Yeah.
okay, so then we get to really look at, are we having some of these experiences? Are we not having these experiences? And if not, what would we do? What are the results that we would want? How do we get closer to that?
So I want to invite everyone on this call to take out their journal sometime today or this weekend and write out what you want in your life, in your relationship, in your sex life, and really give yourself the space to really think about it and to feel it. And one of the things that I love about journaling is giving myself that space, like, okay, close my eyes. I want to be here right now. Think about my relationship and how do I want to feel in it? How do I want to feel into it? And, maybe that's something that you just keep to yourself, but you have a North Star in this writing, or you do share it with your partner or have them do it too. I just think that's such a beautiful exploration of self and connection and being conscious about what we want to put out and get back. So
there's a question in the chat. Okay, what if you're vulnerable, curious, authentic, open, direct, trusting, and positive with your partner, with your feelings and theirs, but it doesn't work, right? It backfires, causes the opposite reaction. I'm assuming, sadly, they aren't the right person for you, in my experience, but wondering about timing and perception of how hard it can be to convince your partner that you're honest and truthful, but they don't believe you for whatever reason. Yeah, I mean, that's a situation where I think it's important to get help and professional help, because anytime that we open up and get vulnerable and someone cuts us down, or there's violence or, abuse, it's right. Someone is not they're not healthy mentally, right? If they were, and again, I'm not trying to judge that person, and we can all be reactive. But if there's violence or if there's abuse, then, right, it's not the right person. They're not going to actually honor and respect you in the ways that you deserve to be. And so I would either try to get some professional help in that situation or figure out how to leave. And I know that's a rough one, but you deserve to be respected and cared for.
Yes. And when you have been in a bad relationship, to be able to cut that off and to spend some time getting to know yourself and to heal. I think it's really important to take that time to heal.
Yeah.
The openings afterwards can be amazing. Yeah. And to know that you deserve that and that you can have that is one thing that I'd like for you to take away today.
Yeah.
So, yes. So parting words, Shana, about love.
Parting words.
Yes, love and passion and connection and how to keep those relationships alive.
Yeah, I think just recognizing, like we said from the very beginning, that this is vulnerable territory. And so take care of yourself. You can kind of test, right, with your vulnerability. You don't have to share the most vulnerable thing first, but, share something that feels a little bit more vulnerable than you'd usually share, and get a sense of what that person's response is. And if it goes well, then you can start sharing a little bit more. And just know that it's not going to be comfortable. I had a conversation with my partner the other day, and I was crying and it was uncomfortable. And it was like, it was so hard for me to say the thing that I wanted to say, but that's okay, right? That's not a sign that we should just zip it and run away from it, because if we do that and we keep shoving things under the rug, then our relationship gets more and more distant and more deadened. So I think it's worth it to take the risk. And if it feels really scary, you can do it with professional help, with coaching, with therapy, or if you have friends who actually are experienced at holding space like that for other people, you can do that. So if it doesn't feel safe to do it alone, there are other ways to do it. And you could read the book together too, right? And start to have those conversations. And I would say just, to be a little patient. Don't feel like things are going to change overnight and you have to just, make it shift overnight. Like, have a little bit of patience as you dip your toe into things.
Thank you, Shana, so much. Again, her book is Honest Sex, A Passionate Path to Deepen Connection and Keep Relationships Alive. I highly recommend it. And make sure and do all the practice sections as well.
Sections. I should have called them sections.
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you. Shana, it's always so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, so good to see you. And thank you for bringing everybody together in the beautiful ways you do.